The Hamptons mansion gleamed under the moonlight, its marble columns and crystal chandeliers whispering wealth. Inside, the air was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of a vacuum cleaner. It was midnight, and Grace Robinson, a 28-year-old housekeeper, crept through the grand living room. Her dark skin glistened with a thin sheen of sweat as she polished a mahogany table, her hands steady, but her eyes weary. She wore a simple gray uniform, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a thin silver bracelet. Her late mother's glinted on her wrist. It was the only thing she owned that felt like home. Grace paused, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the table. Liam Whitaker, the 35-year-old CEO of Whitaker Enterprises, shaking hands with some politician. His sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes screamed privilege. Grace had been working for him for 6 months, yet he barely acknowledged her existence. To him, she was invisible, a shadow who kept his world spotless. She sighed, picking up a silver locket that had fallen from the table to the floor. She assumed it was an heirloom, engraved with the initials E.W., Liam's mother. She turned it over in her hands, intending to return it where it belonged. Suddenly the lights flicked on, harsh and blinding. Grace froze as Liam's voice cut through the room like a blade. "What the hell are you doing?" She spun around, clutching the locket. Liam stood in the doorway, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, a glass of whiskey in one hand. His eyes narrowed, locking onto the locket in her grasp. I found it on the floor," Grace stammered, her heart pounding. "I was just putting it back. Putting it back." Liam's voice dripped with contempt. He stepped closer, his 6-foot frame towering over her. "Do you think I'm an idiot? That's my mother's locket. You were stealing it, weren't you?" His words stung, laced with an assumption that felt all too familiar to Grace. She'd seen that look before, the one that said she didn't belong and was less than. "No, Mr. Whitaker. I swear." Grace's voice cracked, but Liam cut her off. "Save it." He pulled out his phone and dialed security. "I want you out of my house. Now." His tone was final, unyielding. Grace's hands trembled as she set the locket on the table, her bracelet catching the light. She wanted to scream to make him listen, but the words caught in her throat. She knew how this looked, a black woman alone in a rich man's house, holding something valuable. No one would believe her. Before she could say another word, a faint piercing sound broke the tension, a baby's muffled but unmistakable cry coming from the closet across the room. Liam's head snapped toward the sound, his brow furrowing. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Grace's face drained of color. "It's nothing," she whispered, but her eyes betrayed her panic. She took a step toward the closet, but Liam was faster. He strode across the room and yanked the door open. Inside, on a folded blanket, lay a tiny baby girl, no more than 6 months old, her small fists waving as she wailed. A worn diaper bag sat beside her, stuffed with a few bottles and clothes. Liam staggered back, his whiskey glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. "What the hell is this?" he roared, turning to Grace. "You brought a child into my house. Hid her in my closet." Grace knelt beside the baby, scooping her up and cradling her tightly. "This is Ava," she said, trembling but fierce. "My daughter. I didn't have a choice. I had no one to watch her tonight, and I couldn't lose this job. Please, Mr. Whitaker, don't call the police. I'm begging you." Liam stared at her, his mind racing. The locket, the baby, the audacity of it all. He felt a surge of betrayal, as if his sanctuary had been violated. "You expect me to believe you?" he snapped. "You're a thief and a liar. Get out, both of you." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she held Ava closer, the baby's cries softening against her chest. She stood her dignity, battered but intact, and looked Liam in the eye. "I'm not a thief," she said quietly. "But you'll never see that." She turned toward the door, the weight of the night pressing down on her. Liam watched her go, his anger warring with a flicker of doubt. The locket gleamed on the table untouched. The bracelet on Grace's wrist flashed one last time. As she stepped into the cold night, Ava bundled in her arms. The mansion fell silent again, but the echo of that baby's cry lingered in Liam's mind, a sound he couldn't shake. If this story grips, you don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We drop heart-pounding drama like this every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Let's see if Liam realizes his mistake, or if Grace and Ava face an even darker fate. Stay tuned. The closet door hung open, its hinges creaking faintly in the silence that followed the baby's piercing cry. Inside the Hamptons mansion, the air felt charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Liam Whitaker stood frozen, his blue eyes wide with disbelief, staring at the tiny figure on a worn blanket. Grace had called her Ava, and the baby flailed her small arms, her cries growing sharper, echoing off the polished floors. Shards of Liam's shattered whiskey glass glittered on the hardwood, starkly contrasting the chaos unfolding. Grace Robinson knelt beside the closet, her gray uniform clinging to her sweat-dampened skin. She scooped Ava into her arms, pressing the baby's face against her chest to muffle the cries. "Shh, sweetheart. It's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling but tender. Her silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, slid down her wrist, catching the light as she rocked Ava gently. Grace's eyes, dark and glistening with unshed tears, darted to Liam, who loomed over her like a storm about to break. "What is this?" Liam's voice was a low growl, each word laced with accusation. "You hid a child in my house, in my closet." He gestured wildly at the cramped space where a faded diaper bag stuffed with a few bottles, a pack of diapers, and a tiny onesie. The sight of it, so out of place in his pristine world, ignited a fresh wave of fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This is my home, not some daycare for your secrets." Grace flinched, but she didn't look away. "I didn't have a choice. Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "Ava's my daughter. She's 6 months old. I couldn't find anyone to watch her tonight, and I couldn't miss work. I thought if I kept her quiet, no one would know." Her words faltered as Ava's cries softened into hiccups. "I swear I wasn't stealing your locket. I found it on the floor. I was putting it back." Liam's jaw tightened, his mind racing. The locket his mother's engraved with EW still sat on the table where Grace had left it untouched since their confrontation. He wanted to believe her, but the betrayal stung too deeply. A housekeeper sneaking a baby into his home. It was unthinkable. "You expect me to trust you," he snapped. "After this, you've been lying to me for months, sneaking behind my back." "I wasn't sneaking." Grace shot back, her voice rising for the first time. She stood clutching Ava tightly, her bracelet glinting as she faced him. "I was surviving. I'm a single mother, Mr. Whitaker. I work 16-hour days to keep a roof over her head. I clean your floors, scrub your dishes, and smile when your guests ignore me like I'm nothing. I hid Ava because I was terrified of losing this job, of losing her." Her words hit Liam like a slap, but he pushed the feeling down. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she held her daughter. But his pride wouldn't bend. "That's not my problem," he said coldly. "You broke my trust. You're done here." Grace's face crumpled, but she didn't beg. She adjusted Ava in her arms, the baby now quiet but wide-eyed, staring at the stranger in the suit. "You're right," Grace said softly, her voice heavy with resignation. It's not your problem. But Ava's not a thief, and neither am I. She turned to the closet, grabbing the diaper bag with one hand. The weight of it pulled at her shoulder, but she stood tall, her dignity a quiet defiance. Liam watched his anger wavering as he noticed the frayed edges of the bag and the way Grace's bracelet seemed to anchor her like a lifeline. He glanced at the locket again, its silver surface gleaming under the chandelier's light. A memory flashed, his mother Elizabeth wearing that locket. Her voice soft as she told him, "Never judge what you don't understand, Liam." He shook it off, hardening his resolve. "Security's on their way," he said, his tone clipped. "You need to leave. Now." Grace nodded, her eyes glistening but resolute. She stepped toward the door, pausing only to look back at the locket. "I hope you find who you're looking for, Mr. Whitaker," she said, her words carrying a weight that unsettled him. With Ava cradled close, she walked out into the chilly night, the mansion's grandeur fading behind her. Liam stood alone, the silence deafening. The closet door still gaped open, the blanket inside a stark reminder of what he'd just seen. Ava's tiny face lingered in his mind, those big curious eyes so innocent, yet out of place. He crossed to the table, picking up the locket, its cool metal heavy in his hand. For the first time, doubt crept in. Had he been wrong? Outside, Grace hugged Ava tighter, the wind biting at her skin. "We'll be okay, baby," she whispered, though her heart ached uncertainly. The road ahead was dark, but she'd walked it before. She always would for Ava. If this moment has you hooked, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. We're diving deeper into Grace and Ava's fight for survival and Liam's battle with his own heart. Will he realize his mistake, or is this the end for Grace? Please drop a comment and let us know what you think. The night air sliced through Grace Robinson's thin uniform as she stepped out of the Hamptons mansion, clutching her 6-month-old daughter Ava to her chest. The wind howled, rattling the manicured hedges lined Liam Whitaker's sprawling estate. Grace's silver bracelet, her mother's heirloom, pressed against Ava's blanket, a cold reminder of the only family she had left. The baby whimpered, her tiny face scrunched against the chill, and Grace pulled her closer, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mama's got you." But her voice trembled, betraying the fear that gnawed at her heart. Inside, Liam stood in the grand living room, his jaw clenched as he stared at the open closet door. The folded blanket where Ava had lain was still there, a silent accusation. The silver locket, his mother's engraved with EW, rested on the mahogany table, its gleam mocking him. Grace's words echoed in his mind. "I'm not a thief." He shook his head, trying to drown them out. She'd betrayed his trust and snuck a child into his home. What else could she be hiding? Yet the memory of Ava's wide, innocent eyes tugged at him, stirring something he couldn't name. The sound of boots on gravel snapped him back. 2 security guards appeared at the door, their faces stern under the glow of the porch lights. "Mr. Whitaker." "We're here," said the older one, Carl. "Where's the intruder?" Liam hesitated, his gaze flicking to the locket. "She's leaving," he said, his voice tight. "Make sure she's off the property, and don't let her back in." Carl nodded, but his brow furrowed slightly, as if sensing the tension in the air. The guards turned and headed outside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Grace was halfway down the driveway, her worn sneakers crunching on the gravel. The diaper bag slung over her shoulder felt heavier, with every step its frayed strap digging into her skin. Ava's soft breaths warmed her neck, but the cold seeped into her bones. She glanced back at the mansion, its windows glowing like unblinking eyes. For 6 months, she'd scrubbed its floors, polished its silver, and swallowed her pride when Liam's guests looked through her like she was part of the furniture. Now it was over. all because she'd tried to keep her daughter safe. "Ma'am, you need to move faster," Carl's voice called from behind. Grace turned to see the guards approaching, their flashlights trained on her. Carl's tone was firm, but not cruel, and she caught a flicker of pity in his eyes. The younger guard smirked, muttering, "Should have known better than to pull something like this." Grace's chest tightened, but she kept walking, her head high. "I didn't pull anything," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. She adjusted Ava, who stirred and let out a small cry. The sound pierced the night, and Grace's heart ached. She had nowhere to go, no family, no savings, just a beat-up car parked a mile away and a few dollars in her pocket. But she wouldn't let them see her break. Back inside, Liam paced the living room, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood. The shattered whiskey glass still lay scattered near the closet, and he bent to pick up a shard, wincing as it pricked his finger. A drop of blood welled up, and he stared at it, his mind flashing to Grace's trembling hands as she'd held Ava. "I was surviving," she'd said. He pushed the thought away, but it clung like a damp cloth. His mother's locket caught his eye again, and he grabbed at the metal cool against his palm. She'd worn it daily, symbolizing her struggles as a single mother. Liam's throat tightened, but he forced himself to focus. Grace had crossed the line. That was all that mattered. Outside, Grace reached the estate's iron gates, which loomed like a barrier between her past and an uncertain future. The guards stopped a few feet behind, watching as she paused to adjust Ava's blanket. "You're off the property," Carl said, his voice softer now. "Don't come back." Grace nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She touched her bracelet, drawing strength from its familiar weight, and stepped onto the public road. The mansion faded into the distance as Grace walked, the cold biting deeper with every step. Ava's cries had quieted, but her tiny body shivered. Grace hummed a lullaby her mother used to sing, the melody barely audible over the wind. "We'll find a way, Ava," she promised, though doubt clawed at her. She thought of the locket and how she'd placed it carefully on the table, hoping Liam would see the truth. But men like him never did. They saw what they wanted: thieves, liars, people like her who didn't belong. Liam sank into a leather armchair. In the mansion, the locket still in his hand. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. He pictured Grace's face, the defiance in her eyes, the way she'd stood up to him, despite everything. And Ava, those big, curious eyes that seemed to see right through him. He squeezed the locket, his mother's voice whispering in his memory, "Never judge what you don't understand." For the first time, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. If Grace and Ava's story pulls at your heartstrings, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more drama like this every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Will Grace find a way to survive, or has Liam's decision sealed her fate? Let us know in the comments. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Liam Whitaker's Hamptons mansion, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood. The living room, once a scene of chaos, now stood eerily still. The overnight staff had swept away shards of Liam's shattered whiskey glass, but the silver locket his mother's engraved with EW remained on the mahogany table untouched. Liam sat in his leather armchair, his tie loosened, a cup of black coffee growing cold in his hand. His blue eyes were bloodshot, fixed on the locket, as if it held answers he wasn't ready to face. He hadn't slept. Grace Robinson's words haunted him. "I'm not a thief." The image of her cradling Ava, her silver bracelet glinting as she walked into the night, replayed in his mind. He'd done the right thing, hadn't he? She'd broken his trust, hidden a child in his home. Yet the memory of Ava's tiny shivering form on that closet blanket gnawed at him. stirring a guilt he couldn't shake. His mother's voice echoed faintly. Never judge what you don't understand. A sharp knock at the door jolted him. Olivia Carter. His 32-year-old assistant stepped in, her tablet tucked under her arm. Her auburn hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, and her green eyes held a mix of concern and determination. Olivia had been with Liam for 5 years, and her sharp wit and loyalty made her indispensable. She'd seen him at his best and his worst. Today she sensed the latter. "Liam, we need to talk," she said. Her tone clipped as she set the tablet on the table. "About last night." Liam rubbed his temples, already dreading the conversation. "There's nothing to talk about, Olivia. She was stealing. She hid a kid in my closet. I fired her. End of story." Olivia raised an eyebrow, unfazed by his defensiveness. "Is it?" She tapped the tablet, pulling up a security app. "You didn't check the cameras, did you?" "Because I did." Her words carried a quiet challenge, and Liam's stomach twisted. He leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low. Olivia swiped the screen, and a grainy video loaded. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., just before the confrontation. The footage showed the living room from a high angle, the locket glinting on the table. Grace entered, her gray uniform slightly wrinkled, her silver bracelet catching the light as she pushed a vacuum cleaner. She paused, her eyes scanning the floor, then bent down to pick something up the locket. She turned it over in her hands, her expression careful, almost reverent, before stepping toward the table to place it back. Liam's breath caught. There was no haste, no guilt in her movements. She wasn't stealing. She was cleaning up his mess as always. "That's not all," Olivia said, fast-forwarding to 11:50 p.m. The video showed Grace opening the closet door and checking on Ava. She adjusted the baby's blanket, her fingers brushing Ava's cheek before closing the door softly. The tenderness in her actions was unmistakable, a stark contrast to the thief Liam had imagined. He sank back in the chair, his face pale. I didn't know," he muttered, his voice barely audible. The locket on the table seemed to pulse with accusation, and he pictured Grace's eyes, fierce yet broken, as she'd said, "You'll never see that." Olivia crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "You didn't want to know, Liam. Grace has been here for 6 months. She works harder than anyone, stays late, and never complains, even when your guests treat her like she's invisible. Did you ever ask her name, her story? Or did you see what was easy? A black woman holding something she shouldn't." Her words stung, cutting deeper than Liam wanted to admit. He thought of the times he'd passed Grace in the halls, barely nodding, her presence as unremarkable as the furniture. He'd never questioned it and never cared. And now he'd thrown her and her child out into the cold without a second thought. "I messed up," he said, finally, his voice raw. He picked up the locket, its weight heavier than before. An image flashed, his mother Elizabeth, a single mother who'd fought to give him everything, her locket always around her neck. Grace's bracelet, her anchor, flickered in his memory. The parallels were undeniable, and they hurt. Olivia softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "You did. But you can fix it. She's out there, Liam, with a baby and nowhere to go. You owe her more than an apology." Liam nodded, his mind racing. He saw Grace's face again, the defiance in her stance as she walked away. And Ava, those big, curious eyes that had looked at him without judgment. He'd been wrong, horribly wrong, and the weight of it crushed him. "Where would she go?" he asked, standing abruptly. "A shelter. A church." Olivia shrugged, but her eyes held a spark of hope. "She mentioned a community center once in the Bronx. Start there. But Liam, don't expect her to forgive you easily." He grabbed his car keys, the locket still clutched in his hand. For the first time in years, Liam Whitaker felt something other than control, regret, raw and unrelenting. He had to find Grace. He had to make this right. If Liam's mistake has you on the edge of your seat, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. We're diving deeper into this heart-wrenching drama every week. Will Liam find Grace and Ava, or is it too late to undo the damage? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The engine of Liam Whitaker's sleek black SUV hummed as he navigated the narrow potholed streets of the Bronx, a world away from the polished opulence of his Hamptons mansion. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m., and the late June sun beat down, turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze. Liam's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white the silver locket, his mother's engraved with EW, tucked in his suit pocket like a talisman. Guilt churned in his chest, sharp and unrelenting, as he replayed the moment he'd banished Grace Robinson and her baby Ava into the cold night. "I'm not a thief," she'd said, her voice steady despite the hurt in her eyes. He hadn't listened. Now he couldn't stop hearing her. The security footage Olivia had shown him that morning had shattered his certainty. Grace hadn't been stealing. She'd been protecting his mother's locket, just as she'd protected her daughter. Liam's mind flashed to Ava's tiny form in the closet, her big eyes peering through the chaos. He'd judged Grace without hesitation, seen only a black woman in a uniform, and assumed the worst. Olivia's words stung. Did you ever ask her name? Her story? He hadn't. But he would now. His first stop was a community center. Olivia had mentioned a squat brick building with faded paint and a sign reading Hope Haven. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cleaning solution. A receptionist, a middle-aged woman with braided hair, eyed Liam's tailored suit skeptically. "You are looking for someone?" she asked, her tone guarded. "Grace Robinson." Liam said, his voice rough. She worked for me. I need to find her. She has a baby Ava." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Grace. She ain't been here in weeks. She stops by sometimes for the single moms group, but not lately." She paused, studying him. "You the one who fired her, ain't you? I heard she got kicked out last night. Real classy." Liam's face burned, but he nodded. "I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. Do you know where she might be?" The receptionist sighed, softening slightly. "Try St. Mary's Church on 149th. They have a shelter program. But don't expect her to be happy to see you." Liam thanked her and left the weight of her words settling like lead in his stomach. At St. Mary's, a volunteer pointed him to a soup kitchen nearby, then a women's shelter 2 blocks over. Each place was a dead end, but the faces he saw, tired, wary, primarily black and Latino, stayed with him. A man outside the shelter, clutching a tattered coat, muttered, "Fancy cars like that don't belong here." Liam felt the truth of it. This wasn't his world, but it was Grace's, and he'd pushed her deeper into it. By dusk, Liam's hope was fraying. He pulled into a gas station, the neon lights glaring. Across the street, a beat-up sedan caught his eye, its windows fogged. A figure moved inside, and his heart lurched. He parked and approached, his polished shoes crunching on broken glass. Through the window he saw her, Grace curled in the driver's seat, Ava cradled in her lap. A thin blanket covered them, and Grace's silver bracelet glinted as she adjusted Ava's position. The baby coughed a weak, raspy sound, and Grace's face tightened with worry. Liam knocked gently on the window. Grace startled, her eyes wide with fear before they hardened with recognition. She rolled the window down an inch, her voice low. "What do you want, Mr. Whitaker?" "I was wrong," Liam said, the words spilling out. "I saw the footage. You didn't take the locket. I shouldn't have fired you." "I'm sorry, Grace." His voice cracked, and he meant it every word. Grace's gaze didn't waver, but her lips trembled. "Sorry doesn't give me my job back, or a place to sleep tonight." Ava coughed again, and Grace's hand moved to the baby's forehead, her bracelet catching the streetlight. She's burning up. I don't need your pity. I need to take care of my daughter. Liam's chest ached. He thought of his mother Elizabeth, who'd raised him alone in a cramped apartment, her locket, a constant reminder of her strength. Grace was fighting the same fight, and he'd made it more complicated. Let me help, he said. Please. I can get a doctor for Ava. A place to stay. I owe you that much. Grace looked at him, her eyes searching for something, sincerity maybe, or a reason to trust. A passerby, a woman pushing a shopping cart, glanced at them and scoffed. Rich folks always think they can fix everything, she muttered, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime's resentment. Grace flinched, and Liam saw how the world judged her, just as he had. I don't know if I can trust you, Grace said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But Ava needs help. That's all that matters. She opened the car door, stepping out with Ava in her arms, the blanket slipping to reveal the baby's flushed cheeks. Liam nodded his hand, brushing the locket in his pocket. He'd made a mess of things, but this was his chance to start making it right. I'll drive, he said, opening the SUV's door. Grace hesitated, then climbed in her bracelet, a quiet anchor as she held Ava close. If Liam's search gripped you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more heart-pounding drama every week. Will Grace forgive Liam, or is her trust too broken to mend? Share your thoughts in the comments. The headlights of Liam Whitaker's SUV cut through the twilight as he drove back to his Hamptons mansion. The engine's hum starkly contrasting with the heavy silence inside. Grace Robinson sat in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped tightly around Ava, whose feverish cheeks glowed faintly in the dim light. Grace's silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, pressed against the baby's blanket, its familiar weight grounding her in the surreal moment. She stared out the window, the passing streetlights blurring through her tears. Trusting Liam felt like stepping onto thin ice, but Ava's raspy coughs left her no choice. Liam's hands gripped the steering wheel, his suit jacket crumpled from the day's search. His mother's silver locket engraved with EW rested in his pocket, a quiet reminder of his guilt. He glanced at Grace, her profile stoic but weary, and felt the weight of his mistake anew. I'm not a thief, she'd said, and he'd refused to listen. Now seeing her protect Ava with every fiber of her being, he saw the truth. Olivia had pointed out, he'd never truly seen Grace. They pulled into the mansion's driveway, the iron gates closing behind them with a soft clang. The grand facade loomed, its marble columns gleaming under floodlights. Grace's tensed memories of last night's humiliation flood back Liam's accusations, the cold wind, as she'd walked away with Ava. Why here? She asked, her voice low but sharp. You think bringing us back fixes anything? Liam turned off the engine, his blue eyes meeting hers. It doesn't, he said, his voice raw. I know that. But Ava needs a doctor, and you need a safe place tonight. I've already called someone, a pediatrician. She'll be here soon, and I'm having a room prepared for you both. It's not charity, Grace. It's what I owe you. Grace's jaw tightened, her pride warring with her exhaustion. She looked down at Ava, whose small hand clutched her finger, and nodded reluctantly. For Ava, she said, stepping out of the car. Liam followed, carrying her frayed diaper bag, its worn straps contrasting with his tailored suit. The mansion felt different inside, less like a fortress and more like a stage for their uneasy truce. Olivia waited in the foyer, her green eyes softening as she saw Grace. I'm glad you're here, she said, her voice warm. The doctor's on her way, and I've set up the guest suite. Come with me. Grace hesitated and followed her steps slow, Ava's weight grounding her. The guest suite was a world apart from the closet, where Ava had hidden a spacious room with soft linens, a crib, and a window overlooking the garden. Grace set Ava in the crib, her bracelet glinting as she adjusted the baby's blanket. "This is too much," she murmured, her voice thick with unease. "It's not," Liam said from the doorway, his tone quieter now. "I was wrong, Grace. I saw the footage. You weren't stealing. You were doing your job, and I judged you without thinking. I'm sorry." He stepped closer, his hands fidgeting, unused to vulnerability. "I want to help, not just tonight, but until you're back on your feet." Grace looked at him, her dark eyes searching for deceit, but finding only sincerity. "Words are easy," she said. "You don't know me, Mr. Whitaker. You don't know what it's like to fight for every scrap of respect." Her voice wavered, but she held his gaze. "I'll stay for Ava, but don't think this makes us even." Liam nodded, respecting her boundaries. Before he could respond, Ava stirred her cough, turning into a soft wail. Grace moved to soothe her, but Liam stepped forward instinctively. "Can I try?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Grace raised an eyebrow, skeptical, but stepped aside. Liam leaned over the crib, his large hands awkward as he patted Ava's back. "Hey, little one," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He started humming a clumsy, off-key version of a lullaby his mother used to sing. Ava's cries slowed, her big eyes locking onto his. The world shrank to just them for a moment, and Liam felt something shift, a warmth he hadn't known he could feel. Grace watched her expression softening, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Olivia, lingering by the door, smiled faintly. "You're not half bad at that," she said, breaking the moment. She turned to Grace. "You should know, Grace. I've seen your work. That night you stayed late cleaning up after the gala. When someone spilled wine on the rug, you didn't have to, but you did. Liam needs to hear that." Grace's cheeks warmed, but she didn't respond. The doorbell rang, signaling the doctor's arrival, and Olivia ushered her in. As the pediatrician examined Ava, Liam stepped back, his mind racing. He thought of his mother Elizabeth raising him alone, her locket symbolizing her resilience. Grace's bracelet, her anchor, mirrored that strength. He'd misjudged her, but he wouldn't again. As the doctor prescribed medicine for Ava's fever, Grace sat beside the crib, her hand resting on her daughter's tiny chest. Liam watched from the doorway, the locket heavy in his pocket. This was only the beginning, but for the first time, he felt a purpose beyond himself. If this heartfelt moment has you hooked, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more drama weekly, and you won't want to miss what's next. Will Grace and Liam find common ground, or is their trust too fragile? Let us know in the comments. The guest suite in Liam Whitaker's Hamptons mansion was bathed in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, its warm light starkly contrasting to the cold night Grace Robinson had endured just 24 hours ago. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, her hands gently smoothing the blanket over her 6-month-old daughter, Ava, who slept peacefully in the crib. The pediatrician had confirmed Ava's fever was subsiding, thanks to the medicine, and the baby's steady breaths brought Grace a fragile sense of relief. Her silver bracelet, her late mother's keepsake, glinted as she adjusted Ava's tiny arm, its familiar weight a quiet anchor in the storm of her life. Across the room, Liam leaned against the doorway. His suit jacket discarded, his white shirt slightly unbuttoned. The silver locket, his mother's engraved with EW, rested in his pocket, its presence a constant reminder of his past. He watched Grace, her movements tender yet guarded, and felt ashamed. He'd misjudged her, cast her out without a second thought, and now, seeing her strength in the face of such adversity, he wanted to understand the woman he'd so easily dismissed. "Grace," he said softly, breaking the silence. "Can we talk? I want to know more about you, about why you're here." His voice was hesitant, unused to asking rather than commanding. Grace's hand paused on Ava's blanket, her dark eyes flicking to him with wariness and exhaustion. "Why now?" she asked, her tone sharp, but low, mindful of Ava's sleep. "You didn't care before. You didn't even know my name until yesterday." Liam winced, her words cutting deep. "You're right," he admitted, stepping into the room. "I didn't see you. I was wrong. But I'm here now, and I'm listening. If you're willing to share." Grace studied him, her fingers tracing the bracelet on her wrist. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but something in Liam's eyes, raw, unguarded, made her pause. She glanced at Ava, her reason for everything, and sighed. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't for you. It's for me. So, I remember who I am." She leaned back, her gaze distant, and began. "I wasn't always a housekeeper, Mr. Whitaker. I was a medical student at Howard University, top of my class. I had dreams, big ones. I wanted to be a pediatrician and help kids like Ava." Her lips curved faintly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then I met Derek. He was charming, white, from a wealthy family. He said he loved me. I believed him. I thought we'd build a life together when I got pregnant." Her voice hardened. But Derek changed. "When I told him about Ava, he told me to get rid of it. Said a baby would ruin his plans and his family's reputation. I refused. That's when the real him came out. He didn't hit me, not physically, but his family did worse. They called me names and said I was a gold digger, a nobody trying to trap their son. They pressured Howard, pulled strings, and my scholarship disappeared. I had to drop out 6 months from graduating." Liam's chest tightened, his hand brushing the locket in his pocket. He thought of his mother, Elizabeth, a single mother who'd faced whispers and judgment for raising him alone. "What happened next?" he asked, his voice quiet. Grace's fingers tightened on her bracelet, her eyes glistening. "I moved back to the Bronx and worked odd jobs to save for Ava. Derek's family sent lawyers and threatened to take her if I asked for support. I cut all ties, moved to a new apartment, and started over. When Ava was born, I promised her I'd be enough. This bracelet," she lifted her wrist. "The silver catching the light was my mom's. She raised me alone too. I died when I was 16. It reminds me to keep going no matter what." She looked at Liam, her gaze unflinching. "That's why I took your job. I love scrubbing floors, but not because it pays enough to keep Ava fed. I hid her in your closet because I was desperate, not deceitful. Every day I swallow my pride when your guests look through me, when they assume I'm less than them. But I do it for her." Liam sat on a nearby chair, his head bowed. Grace's story mirrors his mother's. Elizabeth had worked double shifts and endured sideways glances, all for him. The locket in his pocket felt heavier, a symbol of her sacrifices. "I had no idea," he said, his voice thick. My mom was like you. She raised me alone and fought for every penny. I should have seen it in you." "I'm sorry, Grace." Grace's expression softened, but her guard remained. "Don't feel sorry for me," she said. "I don't need pity. I need a world where Ava doesn't have to fight like I do." She looked at her daughter, her voice softening. "She's my strength, not my burden." Liam nodded, a new respect settling in his chest. He thought of Olivia's words. Grace works harder than anyone. He saw it now, the resilience, the love, the fire beneath Grace's quiet exterior. "You're not alone anymore," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "I mean it. I'll help whatever it takes." Grace didn't respond, but her eyes held him for a moment longer than before. Ava stirred in the crib, letting out a soft coo, and Grace's hand moved to soothe her. The bracelet glinted, a quiet testament to her endurance. Liam stood, the locket a promise, in his pocket. He'd made mistakes, but learned from them for Grace, Ava, and the man he wanted to be. If Grace's story has you in tears, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more heart-wrenching drama every week. Will Liam prove he's changed, or is Grace's fight far from over? Share your thoughts in the comments. The ballroom of the Hamptons' most exclusive venue sparkled under cascading chandeliers, filled with the clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of wealth. The charity gala hosted by Whitaker Enterprises to support local community centers was in full swing. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns mingled, their laughter echoing off marble walls. Liam Whitaker stood near the stage, his tailored tuxedo impeccable, the silver locket his mother's engraved with EW tucked in his pocket. His blue eyes scanned the crowd, but his thoughts were elsewhere, lingering on Grace Robinson and her daughter Ava, who were settling into his mansion's guest suite. Grace had agreed to attend the gala at Liam's insistence, a gesture to thank the donors supporting the Single Mothers program at Hope Haven, the community center she'd once relied on. She stood near the edge of the room, her simple black dress borrowed from Olivia, Liam's assistant. Her silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, glinted on her wrist, a quiet reminder of her strength. Ava was safe with a trusted nanny at the mansion, but Grace's heart raced. This world of wealth and privilege wasn't hers, and the weight of countless eyes made her feel exposed. Liam caught her gaze across the room and offered a slight encouraging nod. Over the past week, their uneasy truce had softened, built on late-night talks and his clumsy but genuine efforts with Ava. Yet Grace remained guarded, her trust hard-earned. She reminded herself that she was here for the center, not for him, adjusting her bracelet as she prepared to speak. The MC, a polished woman in a red gown, took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have Grace Robinson, a beneficiary of Hope Haven, share a few words about the program's impact. Polite applause followed, and Grace stepped forward, her step steady, despite the knot in her stomach. She gripped the microphone, her voice clear but soft. "Thank you," she began. "Hope Haven gave me a lifeline when I had nothing. As a single mother, I've faced doors closing and judgments I didn't deserve. Their support helped me keep my daughter Ava safe. Your donations tonight will help others. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." The crowd clapped, some with genuine warmth, others with the practiced politeness of the elite. Grace exhaled, ready to step down, when a voice cut through the applause. Ms. Robinson called a man in a crisp suit, his tone smooth but pointed. It was Edward Langley, a prominent donor and old friend of Liam's family. He stood glass in hand, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A moving story. But tell us, how do you manage a housekeeper's salary? It must be tough raising a child alone. Any generous benefactors helping out?" The room fell silent, the air thick with implication. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and Grace's face burned. Langley's question wasn't innocent. It was a veiled accusation, painting her as a woman who'd latched onto Liam's wealth. Her hand tightened on her bracelet, the silver biting into her skin. She'd heard this from Derek's family, and strangers who saw her skin and assumed her worth. "I manage," Grace said, her voice steady, but edged with steel. "I work hard, Mr. Langley. Every cent I earn is for my daughter. I don't need handouts, and I don't chase them." Her eyes flicked to Liam, who stood frozen, his jaw tight. Langley chuckled, undeterred. "Of course. Just curious. You're quite fortunate to have Mr. Whitaker's support." The word "fortunate" dripped with insinuation, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Grace felt the weight of their stares, the same invisible judgment she'd endured for years. Liam stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's enough, Edward," he said, his tone low but firm. "Grace is here because of her strength, not my charity. She's earned every bit of respect you owe her." He moved to Grace's side, his presence a shield, but the damage was done. Grace's chest ached, her pride bruised. She handed the microphone to the MC and walked off the stage. Her steps quick, her bracelet glinting under the chandeliers. Liam followed, catching her in the hallway. "Grace, wait," he called, but she didn't stop. "I shouldn't have come," she said, trembling. "I knew this would happen. They see me and think, gold digger, charity case. I'm done being their story." She turned, her eyes blazing. "You can't fix this, Liam. Not with money or words." Before Liam could respond, his phone buzzed. Olivia was calling from the mansion. "It's Ava," she said, her voice urgent. "She's spiking a fever again. The nanny's worried." Grace's face drained of color, and Liam's heart sank. They rushed to the car without a word, the gala's glitter fading behind them. As they sped toward the mansion, Grace clutched her bracelet, her thoughts on Ava. Liam's hand brushed the locket in his pocket, and his mother's strength was a distant echo. He'd tried to protect Grace, but failed to shield her from the world's cruelty. Now, with Ava in danger, he vowed to do better no matter the cost. If this gala drama reels you, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more heart-pounding stories every week. Will Grace and Ava pull through, or is this the breaking point? Share your thoughts in the comments. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the pediatric ward of Southampton Hospital. As Grace Robinson sat beside a small hospital bed, her eyes fixed on her 6-month-old daughter, Ava. The baby lay pale and fragile, an IV line taped to her tiny arm, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Grace's silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, glinted under the fluorescent lights as she gently stroked Ava's hand, her fingers trembling. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. "Pneumonia. We're treating it, but she's not out of the woods." Grace's heart clenched, fear wrapping around her like a vice. Liam Whitaker stood by the window, his tuxedo rumpled from the frantic drive from the gala. The silver locket his mother's engraved with EW weighed heavy in his pocket, a reminder of his mother's battles. He glanced at Grace, her face etched with worry, and felt helpless. Just hours ago, she'd faced humiliation at the gala. Edward Langley's veiled accusations, cutting her down in front of a glittering crowd. Now Ava's illness had stripped away any pretense, leaving only raw, shared fear. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft beeping of monitors. Grace hadn't spoken since they'd arrived, her focus locked on Ava. Liam hesitated, then pulled a chair beside her. "Grace," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "She's strong, like you. She'll pull through." Grace's eyes flicked to him, glistening with unshed tears. "You don't know that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's all I have. If I lose her—" She trailed off, her hand tightening on Ava's, the bracelet pressing into her wrist. "I've fought for her every day, Liam. But what if it's not enough?" Her words hit Liam like a punch. He thought of his mother, Elizabeth, who'd sat by his bedside during childhood fevers, her locket glinting as she prayed. Grace's fear mirrored that same fierce love, and it stirred something profound in him, a need to protect, to be more than the man who'd judged her so wrongly. "It's enough," he said, his voice firm. "You're enough, and you're not alone in this. I'm here." Grace shook her head, her gaze returning to Ava. "You don't get it," she said, her voice barely audible. "This world, it chews up people like me. That man Langley didn't just question me at the gala. He reminded everyone I don't belong. I've heard it my whole life. From Derek's family, from strangers, from you that first night. I keep fighting, but sometimes I'm so tired." Liam's throat tightened, guilt flooding him. He saw it now, the weight of a lifetime's judgment layered on Grace's shoulders. He'd added to it, assuming she was a thief without a second thought. I was wrong, he said, leaning closer. I didn't see you then, but I do now. You're stronger than anyone in that room tonight, and Ava's got that strength because of you. Grace didn't respond, but a tear slipped down her cheek, glinting like her bracelet. The monitor beeped steadily, and Ava stirred her tiny fingers curling around Grace's. The sight broke something in Liam. He reached out, hesitating, then placed his hand over Grace's, his touch tentative, but warm. I won't let you face this alone, he said. Not tonight. Not ever. For the first time, Grace didn't pull away. She looked at him, her eyes searching, and something shifted, a fragile bridge forming between them. The hospital clock ticked past midnight, and Liam stayed his hand still on hers. He thought of his mother alone in moments like this. Her locket symbolized her resilience. Grace's bracelet held that same power, and he felt a connection to her he couldn't explain, a shared understanding of love's fierce, unyielding fight. Hours passed the night, stretching thin. Liam stood to stretch, his gaze falling on Ava's small form. Her cheeks were less flushed, and her breathing steadier. The doctor entered, her expression cautiously optimistic. She's responding to the antibiotics, she said. It's a good sign, but we'll keep her for observation. Grace exhaled, a sob catching in her throat. She leaned down, kissing Ava's forehead, her bracelet brushing the baby's cheek. Liam watched, his heart swelling with relief and something more profound, a bond he hadn't expected. He stepped closer, his voice low. From now on, I'm in this with you. For Ava. For you. Grace met his eyes, her guard still up but softening. We'll see. She said, her voice quiet but not cold. She turned back to Ava, but the weight of Liam's promise lingered, a flicker of hope in the sterile room. As dawn broke, painting the sky outside in soft pinks, Liam pulled the locket from his pocket, its silver warm from his touch. He wasn't his mother, but he could honor her by being better for Grace, Ava, and the family he was beginning to imagine. If this hospital vigil has your heart racing, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more emotional drama every week. Will Ava recover, and can Liam earn Grace's trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Liam Whitaker's Hamptons mansion, casting a warm glow over the guest suite, where Grace Robinson sat cradling her 6-month-old daughter Ava. The baby, now recovering from pneumonia, cooed softly, her tiny fingers clutching Grace's silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake. Grace's dark eyes softened as she kissed Ava's forehead, relief washing over her after the harrowing night at the hospital. Yet, a lingering unease clung to her, stirred by the gala's humiliation and the fragile trust she'd begun to place in Liam. Liam stood in the doorway, his casual sweater far from his usual tailored suit. His mother's silver locket engraved with EW rested in his pocket, a quiet anchor as he watched Grace and Ava. The hospital vigil had changed something between them, his promise to stand by her forging a bond he hadn't expected. But Grace's guarded glances reminded his trust was still a work in progress. He was about to speak when Olivia, his assistant, burst in, her green eyes wide with urgency. Liam, Grace, you need to see this, Olivia said, holding her phone. A news article from a local tabloid flashed on the screen. Millionaire CEO's charity case, Housekeeper's secret baby sparks rumors. The article mentioned Liam's support for Grace and Ava, twisting their story into a scandal. Worse, it included a photo of Grace leaving the hospital, her bracelet glinting and Ava in her arms. Grace's face paled. How did they get this? She whispered, her voice trembling. Who would do this? Her fingers tightened on Ava, the bracelet pressing into her wrist. The gala's sting. Edward Langley's insinuations felt fresh, and now the world was judging her again. Before Liam could respond, a loud knock echoed through the mansion. Olivia frowned, heading to the foyer. Moments later, she returned, her expression grim. Grace, it's... Someone claiming to be Ava's father. He's demanding to see you. Grace froze, her breath catching. Derek. She said the name a bitter weight. Liam's jaw tightened, recalling Grace's story. Derek, the man who'd abandoned her, whose family had crushed her dreams. Stay here, Liam said, his voice firm. I'll handle this. But Grace stood Ava in her arms. No. She said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. He's my past. I face him. She handed Ava to Olivia, who nodded, and followed Liam to the front door, her bracelet a quiet reminder of her strength. Derek stood on the porch, his polished shoes and designer jacket contrasting with the man Grace remembered. His brown hair was slicked back, his smile charming but cold. Grace, he said, his voice smooth. Been a while. Heard you're doing well cozying up with a millionaire. His eyes flicked to Liam, then back to her. I'm here for my daughter. Grace's chest tightened, rage and fear colliding. You have no right, she said, her voice low but fierce. You told me to get rid of her. You left us. Ava's mine. Derek's smile didn't waver. Things change. I saw the news, your little sob stories making waves. Ava's my blood, and I want her. Or maybe Mr. Whitaker here can make it worth my while to walk away. His words dripped with greed, and Grace realized the tabloid had drawn him like a vulture to carrion. Liam stepped forward, his voice like steel. You're not getting near that child. Ava's not a bargaining chip. Leave, or I'll make sure you regret showing up. Derek laughed, unfazed. Big talk, Whitaker. But I've got lawyers, and I know people. Grace knows I don't lose. He looked at her, his gaze cutting. You think you can keep her from me? A single mom with nothing. Grace's hand gripped her bracelet, her mother's strength flowing through her. I've fought harder battles than you, she said. You don't scare me. But inside she was crumbling. The thought of losing Ava, of Derek's family, wielding their wealth again, was a nightmare she'd buried long ago. Olivia, still holding Ava, stepped into the foyer. Grace, you're not alone, she said firmly. We'll fight this, together. Her words echoed Liam's promise from the hospital, and Grace felt a flicker of hope, but doubt lingered. Relying on Liam meant risking her independence, the one thing she'd clung to through every storm. Derek smirked, handing Grace a business card. Think it over. I'll be back. He turned and left, his footsteps fading into the morning. Grace stared at the card, her hands shaking. Liam placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady. He won't touch Ava, he said. I'll call my lawyers. Whatever it takes. Grace nodded, but her eyes were distant. She thought of her mother, who'd faced the world alone. Her bracelet, a symbol of defiance. Liam's locket, still in his pocket, was his talisman, and she saw his resolve mirrored hers. But Derek's return was a shadow she couldn't outrun, and the fight ahead loomed larger than ever. If Derek's threat has you on edge, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more drama every week. Will Grace and Liam stop Derek? Or is Ava's future at risk? Share your thoughts in the comments. The courtroom in downtown Manhattan buzzed with tension, its oak-paneled walls absorbing the murmurs of spectators. Grace Robinson sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly, her silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her dark eyes were fixed on the judge's bench, but her heart pounded with fear for her 6-month-old daughter Ava, who was safe at Liam's mansion with Olivia. The thought of Derek, Ava's father, claiming custody for his greedy motives was a nightmare Grace had fought to bury. Now it was real, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Liam Whitaker sat beside her, his tailored suit crisp, but his blue eyes shadowed with resolve. The silver locket his mother's engraved with EW rested in his pocket, a silent reminder of the woman who'd raised him alone, just as Grace fought for Ava. Over the past weeks, Liam had poured his resources into this fight, hiring top lawyers to counter Derek's claims. The hospital vigil and Derek's threats had solidified his commitment, not just to right his initial wrong, but to protect the family he was beginning to see in Grace and Ava. Across the room, Derek lounged at the defendant's table, his slick smile exuding confidence. His expensive suit and polished demeanor masked the man who'd abandoned Grace. But she knew the truth. His demand for custody was a ploy to extort Liam, fueled by the tabloid article that had exposed her story. Grace's bracelet pressed into her wrist as she steadied herself, drawing strength from her mother's memory. The judge, a stern woman with graying hair, called the session to order. Derek's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Hargrove, stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "my client, Derek Coleman, seeks custody of his daughter, Ava Robinson. Ms. Robinson is an unfit mother, living in unstable conditions, recently unemployed, and relying on the charity of Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Coleman offers a stable, affluent home for the child." Grace's stomach churned as Hargrove painted her as a failure, twisting her struggles into proof of inadequacy. He mentioned the night Ava was found in Liam's closet, calling it neglectful behavior. The words stung, echoing the gala's humiliation where she'd been labeled a gold digger. She glanced at Liam, who gave her a reassuring nod, his jaw tight. Liam's lawyer, Ms. Elena Torres, rose, her presence commanding. "Your Honor, Ms. Robinson is a devoted mother who has faced extraordinary challenges. She worked tirelessly to provide for Ava, even under financial strain. The closet incident was a desperate act to keep her job, not neglect. Let's examine Mr. Coleman's motives." Torres presented a stack of documents, Derek's text messages to Grace, demanding she get rid of Ava, and records of his family's threats that cost Grace her scholarship at Howard. The courtroom gasped as Torres played a clip from Liam's security footage, the same video that had cleared Grace of theft. It showed her tenderly checking on Ava in the closet, her bracelet catching the light as she adjusted the baby's blanket. "This is a mother's love," Torres said, "not neglect. Compare that to Mr. Coleman, who has a history of domestic disputes and a conviction for fraud." Derek's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. Grace's heart raced, hope flickering. But Hargrove countered, accusing Grace of manipulating Liam for financial gain, citing the tabloid article. The judge's expression remained unreadable, and Grace felt the weight of judgment, another room where her worth was questioned because of her skin and status. Then Liam stood, his voice steady but charged. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge nodded, and Liam faced the room, his hand brushing the locket in his pocket. "I was wrong about Grace once. I assumed the worst, like too many do. But I've seen her strength, her love for Ava. She's not a charity case. She's a mother who'd do anything for her child. Mr. Coleman abandoned Ava before she was born. He's here for money, not love. I'm not just fighting for Grace. I'm here to say I'll adopt Ava as my daughter, give her the home she deserves, with Grace as her mother." The room erupted in whispers, and Grace's breath caught. She stared at Liam, her eyes wide with shock, and something softer perhaps, gratitude or the beginnings of trust. Her bracelet felt warm against her wrist, as if her mother were there nodding in approval. Derek's face twisted with rage, but the judge's gavel drowned out his lawyer's objections. "Enough," the judge said. "I've heard the evidence. Ms. Robinson's actions, while unconventional, were driven by necessity, not neglect. Mr. Coleman's history and motives raise serious concerns. Custody remains with Ms. Robinson. Case dismissed." Grace collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. Liam's hand found hers, his grip steady, and she didn't pull away. The locket in his pocket. His mother's legacy felt like a promise fulfilled. As they left the courtroom, Grace looked at Liam, her voice soft. "Thank you," she said, the words heavy with meaning. But the victory was bittersweet. Derek's shadow lingered, and Grace knew the world's judgments wouldn't fade easily. Still with Liam by her side, she felt a strength she hadn't known before, a chance to build something new. If this courtroom drama has you cheering, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more heart-pounding stories every week. Will Grace and Liam's bond grow stronger, or are there more challenges ahead? Share your thoughts in the comments. The garden behind Liam Whitaker's Hamptons mansion bloomed with summer roses, their petals swaying in a gentle June breeze. A year had passed since the night Liam had mistaken Grace Robinson for a thief, a misunderstanding that had unraveled into a journey of redemption and love. Today, the garden was transformed into a simple wedding venue, with white chairs arranged in rows and a wooden arch draped in ivy. Grace stood beneath it, her ivory dress flowing softly, her silver bracelet, her mother's keepsake, glinting in the sunlight. Her dark eyes sparkled with a joy she'd once thought impossible, fixed on Liam, who stood opposite her, his smile warm and unguarded. Ava, now a lively 18-month-old, toddled between them, her tiny dress adorned with a ribbon, her grandmother's silver bracelet, too big for her wrist, tied gently around her ankle as a charm. She giggled, clutching a basket of flower petals, scattering them haphazardly. The small crowd, Olivia, a few close friends, and Hope Haven staff, laughed, their applause soft but heartfelt. This wasn't the lavish affair typical of Liam's world. It was intimate, honest, a testament to the family they'd built from ashes of mistrust. In a tailored but understated suit, Liam held Grace's hands, his blue eyes reflecting the weight of their shared path. The silver locket his mother's engraved with EW hung around his neck, a tribute to Elizabeth, whose strength had guided him to this moment. He thought of the night he'd accused Grace, the closet where Ava had cried, and the courtroom where he'd vowed to adopt her. Each step had been a lesson in humility, in seeing beyond his privilege to the woman who'd changed his life. The officiant, a kind-eyed woman from St. Mary's Church, spoke warmly. "Grace and Liam, you've faced trials that would break most. Yet here you stand, bound by love, not just for each other, but for Ava, for truth, for second chances. Do you take each other as partners in all that lies ahead?" "I do," Grace said, her voice steady, her bracelet catching the light. She looked at Liam, remembering his cold accusation, then his tireless fight through hospital nights, Derek's threats, and the courtroom victory. He'd earned her trust not with wealth, but with actions proving he truly saw her. "I do." Liam echoed, his voice thick with emotion. He squeezed Grace's hands, thinking of his mother who'd raised him alone. Her locket symbolized sacrifice. Grace's bracelet mirrored that resilience, and he felt Elizabeth's presence smiling down on them. Ava squealed, dropping her basket, and the crowd chuckled as Olivia scooped her up, whispering, "You're stealing the show, kiddo." The officiant grinned, pronouncing them married, and Liam pulled Grace into a kiss, soft but fierce, sealing a promise forged in fire. The guests clapped their cheers, a quiet triumph over the world's judgments. As the ceremony ended, Liam knelt beside Ava, who babbled happily. He lifted the locket from his neck and placed it in Grace's hands. "This was my mom's," he said, his voice low. "She'd want you to have it. It belongs to our family now." Grace's eyes glistened, her fingers tracing the EW, before slipping the locket into her pocket beside her bracelet. The two heirlooms, hers and his, felt like a bridge between their pasts and future. The reception was simple tables under string lights, music from a local band, and food from a Bronx caterer Grace had chosen to honor her roots. Olivia raised a glass, her toast heartfelt. To Grace, who taught us strength, to Liam, who learned it, and to Ava, who brought them together. You're proof that love can heal what hate tries to break. Grace leaned against Liam Ava on her hip and felt a peace she'd never known. The tabloid scandal, Derek's defeat, and the gala's sting were scars, but they'd led her here. She thought of her mother, who'd worn the bracelet through her battles, and felt her blessing in the breeze. Liam's arm around her was steady, his promise from the hospital, "I won't let you face this alone now," a vow etched in time. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold, Grace looked at her family, imperfect, hard-won hers. The mansion, once a place of judgment, was now a home. She touched her bracelet, then the locket in her pocket, and smiled. They'd overcome misunderstanding, prejudice, and pain, proving that truth and kindness could rewrite even the darkest stories. The band played a soft melody, and Liam took Grace's hand, leading her to the dance floor, with Ava between them. The little girl laughed, her bracelet charmed ankle kicking, and the guests joined in their joy, a defiance of the world's divisions. This was their beginning. Not perfect, but theirs built on love that saw beyond color, class, or past mistakes. If this heartwarming ending has you in tears, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're dropping more emotional stories every week. What did you love most about Grace and Liam's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments.